Hello again. Andrew Clay Schaefer. Over here, we're hustling. We're in the home stretch to put on DevOps Days Pittsburgh. Been working on some ice cream and some T-shirts for everybody. And I'm joined today with a special guest who's also representing a sponsor from the DevOps League of Legends. I have Mark Imbriaco, and I'll let him introduce himself a bit more.
Hey Andrew, thanks for having me. It's always fun to chat. So yeah, I'm Mark Imbriaco. I've been kind of doing ops and DevOps and development and ops and whatever the heck we're going to call it these days for a really long time, kind of going back to the mid-90s, and I've worked at a bunch of different places that are interesting to some people. Like way back in the day, I worked at America Online at sort of the peak of the dot-com boom. And then I did a couple of little startups doing software development and kind of got back into ops full-time at 37 Signals, sort of back in the mid-2000s. And spent a few years there, built out their infrastructure and built a pretty cool ops team there. Then I moved on to Heroku. Heroku is a platform as a service, as I'm sure most of you people know. Heroku, when I got there, was about 60,000 apps. A year and a half later, they were over 1.5 million apps, so it was a pretty insane growth and a lot of fun. I went there. I thought I would try out e-commerce, so I went to Living Social, and I found out I don't really like e-commerce that much. Selling daily deals is kind of boring. It's a great company, but the product didn't appeal to me, so I decided to move on again, and I went to GitHub, which kind of got me back to what I like to do, which is, and why I like DevOps. We'll talk about this in a minute, but I like to do things that enable developers to ship amazing products and code and get things done. So I went to GitHub because it felt like there were very few places that were as good to have that kind of impact as GitHub. So I spent a couple of years at GitHub, and in the last month or so decided to move on, and now I am the VP of Tech Ops at DigitalOcean, where we are.
Tech Ops at DigitalOcean.
Yeah.
So you've seen the whole thing, right? You've seen this all evolve from where there wasn't really web ops, there wasn't really a word DevOps to now. So what does DevOps mean to Mark Imbriaco?
Yeah, I think I'll start with what it's not. It's not about tools. I hate when people start talking about DevOps and they start talking about tools. I think tools can help enable it, but what it's really about is about helping developers and ops guys work closer together, and to make ops guys think a little bit more like developers, make developers think a little bit more like ops guys. It's not about making developers do their own system administration work. It's not about having ops guys write all the code that goes into production, but it's about having ops guys who can think like developers and can empathize with developers, and having developers who can have some empathy and understanding of systems and relate to the ops guys, and having everyone work together. What's that?
And carry pagers.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, that's part of empathy, right? I think it's really easy to lose sight of the fact that there are people getting woken up at 3 a.m. for your code if you never get woken up at 3 a.m. for your code. So I think it's really useful to have developers as part of the pager rotation, and we do that at DigitalOcean. It's interesting. That was literally day 2 at DigitalOcean. I would talk to the engineers and said, hey, we'd like to set up an on-call rotation so that when we get paged in the middle of the night and we don't know how to fix a problem, we can call you for help. And they were like, hey, that makes sense. That's cool. Let's do that. So we did it. The funny story, I haven't had to use it yet, but it's there, and we have a rotation, and it's set up in PagerDuty, and if I need to get a hold of somebody at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., I can.
Very nice. So you've also done the full spectrum of this whole software as a service, platform as a service, and now infrastructure as a service. And maybe we could talk a little bit about how you see, and you also, you have friends, and you're part of the Velocity. We're on the program committee for Velocity together. And we have a bunch of friends that aren't necessarily in web ops. So how do you see this kind of DevOps? Whether there's some definitely some technology things, but there's obviously like cultural things too. How do you think that optimizes or is a competitive advantage for the kind of stuff you're doing with DigitalOcean?
Yeah, I think it's not just a competitive advantage; it's a necessity. I think you're at a tremendous competitive disadvantage if you can't move quickly.
It's the ante. It's just the ante to get at the table.
Yeah, exactly. If you are not willing to step up to the plate and do what it takes to go fast, and that is, think about culture and think about things that are not just sort of. There's a role for process. I was going to say it's not just about process. There is a role for process, but it's really about culture and about learning and about understanding and empathizing and having everyone sort of work together for the common goal. I mean, you need structure around that, but at the end of the day, it's about culture. It's about making sure that everybody understands kind of where you're going and is involved in the process. You know, that's one of the things that we've got some new projects that I can't talk about at DO right now. But one of the other first things I did after the dev pager rotation was talk to the developers and say, hey, I want to have somebody from my SRE team involved in every new project that happens, and that doesn't mean they're going to be, you know, embedded in sort of everyday hacking on code with the developers sort of role, because I don't think that makes sense. But it does mean that I want them to subscribe to the repos for those projects and read all the commits and understand what's going on and attend the stand-ups and sort of represent the ideas of the systems group and the SREs to the developers. So, you know, developers are working on something and, you know, the SRE is right there as part of the stand-up. He could say, hey, well, why don't you think about maybe adding this monitoring endpoint, or why don't you think about structuring the file system in this way because it'll make our lives a little bit easier. And the devs are just like, hey, we never thought about that, but that's easy. We'll do that. It makes your life easier. Why wouldn't we?
So looking back, I mean, because you have this deep past, so kind of reflecting on where things have come since the AOL days and through all these startups to now, what do you think is the biggest change in the way that you think about the world and see these sort of technologies, process, and people flowing together?
Well, I mean, I think that we don't do QA anymore. That's the biggest change. We used to have this big artificial wall, and a lot of people like to talk about this. When I was at AOL, we very much had the sort of old school developers write the code, they toss it over the wall to QA, QA compiles it, tosses it over the wall to ops. Maybe they test it, but you couldn't prove it by me. And the ops guys didn't really have a channel to talk to the developers. What we did is we spent all of our time working around bugs in the code instead of telling someone about it so they could fix it. And that was a very sort of dysfunctional way of working, right? Like, it's not going to improve the quality of the software. The developers are not going to have any feedback from production. They're going to continue to do things that make the ops guys upset. And the ops guys don't have any recourse to get these problems solved. And even worse, it's really insidious because since they're never talking to the developers, it's really easy to sort of see them as this faceless sort of
non-human
villain, yeah, off to the side who's doing things to piss you off. When really they're just trying to get their work done and they're not getting feedback, so they don't know that they're causing problems. So I think that's the biggest thing that's changed. I think it's become apparent to almost everyone at this point that way just doesn't work. If you want to deliver quality software in a reasonable amount of time, or even an unreasonable amount of time, you can't work that way.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, we're watching the same story, and I think that there's still more to go. Right? Like, we're still evolving.
Totally.
You look at, you know, we talked a little bit about tools, and I do think tools are a big enabler. You know, I think the pendulum kind of swings where people are like, let's stop talking about tools. But you look at what's happening with the Docker tools, and, you know, even the configuration management tools are evolving. Monitoring is, you know, what the stuff Jason's trying to promote and kind of get people thinking about. I think it's not going to slow down. It's just going to accelerate. So you're going to either get on this learning wave. Like, DevOps is not a solved problem. DevOps is this thing in the horizon that we're walking towards.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing about tools that irritates me is that we end up letting tools divide us instead of bring us together, right? So you end up with the guys who are in the Puppet camp and the guys who are in the Chef camp and the guys who are in the Ansible camp, and they're all sort of sniping at each other instead of talking about ways to improve our craft as a whole, and that bothers me. You know, at the end of the day, I like Chef, but if there's a better tool, I'll use it. And if there's a tool that works better for my company, I'll use it. I spent 2 years at GitHub working with Puppet. And did I complain a little bit? Sure, I complained a little bit because I didn't like the tool. But at the end of the day, it worked and it got the job done and it made our lives a little bit easier. So I think the tools are important, but at the end of the day, I think the culture side of it and the process side of it and learning how to work together and learning how to grow as an organization is far more interesting and important.
The weapons will evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll build them yourself, right? That's the other beauty of the way that the system administrator has evolved into this sort of new world where you're expected to have people who can write code and who can build their own tools. The tools will evolve.
To that point, you at least have these tools, right? And they're there. And everyone's not making their own version of configuration management with SSH and Bash anymore.
That's
But
true. The
as
do it
well,
5.shell is gone.
do it 5.sh.
Exactly.
So let's close it out. I know you have work to do, and I always close when I'm talking to a sponsor. You're here. You're going to be here in Pittsburgh in a week, and you're coming as one of the emissaries of DigitalOcean. So just to get it's your opinion. I know you don't speak for the company, but having been in DevOps days, having been around the rest of these kind of startup communities, open source communities, what do you think someone like DigitalOcean gets from supporting the community? And you gave us real money to help have this event. So what do you feel like the support of the sponsors does to, or gains? What do the sponsors gain from supporting these events?
Yeah, I think all the sponsors gain anytime the community sort of gets a chance to get together and talk about what they want and where the industry is going and what tools they would like to help them get there. I know I complained about tools a little while ago, but as a vendor, we're in the business of building tools and building services. So understanding what people want and even if they don't know how to say what they want, being part of the conversation and getting, just being part of the community and understanding what the community needs and wants and how we can help the community is really what's in it for us. I mean, we're also going to be recruiting like crazy, but
We're going to be recruiting like crazy, you and everyone. But I think that's the point I want to get out there is it's like you get to see what people are building and you get to see how they're building it, and that's either with your stuff or without your stuff. And if it's with your stuff, then you can learn, and if it's not, then you can also learn. Maybe
absolutely.
More.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot for us to learn from other people. Aside from DigitalOcean getting anything tangible out of it as a company, the fact is that it's going to help me evolve my thinking, and it's going to help me learn about new tools that we can apply within our organization to make us better. So that's really what we get out of it.
And you're also recruiting.
And we're recruiting, but we get a free ticket, so I get to come and hug you, and we're gonna have a good time.
Hug ops. Well, I'll see you in a week, and thanks for your time. I know you have to run and get some work done, but we'll see you then, and we'll just fade to black.
Anytime, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.